A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Cam Edwards, your host. Glad that you are with us today. Hopefully you are staying safe. You are socially distancing yourself from folks, and we hope that remains the case here in the coming days. We've got quite a bit of news to get to, as you might well imagine, from around the country. Joining me on the program today, Amy Swear of the Heritage Foundation is going to be with us talking about some of these emergency declarations that we've seen pop up, places like Champaign, Illinois, New Orleans, Louisiana, and there are going to be more. Now, so far we have not seen any attempt to ban the transfer or sale of firearms or the possession of firearms or the carrying of firearms, but we have seen a few ordinances, emergency declarations passed around the country that supposedly gives mayors the authority to do these things. Now, they haven't said, okay, we're going to enact these. We're going to try to ban guns, but they're signing these declarations that supposedly give them the power to do these types of things. So we're going to talk with Amy Swear from the Heritage Foundation about whether or not these communities actually do have the power to try to prevent people from exercising their Second Amendment rights during a state of emergency. As you can imagine, the case law on this is slim to none because we are in a situation that we really have never been in this country before, at least going back to 1918 and the Spanish flu pandemic. We're also going to talk with Larry Keane from the National Shooting Sports Foundation and get you caught up on the surge in ammo sales and gun sales too over the past couple of days. I think the ammo surge started first. Now you're starting to see firearm sales increase as well. And the National Shooting Sports Foundation also keeping an eye on some of these emergency declarations. So that's going to be the focus of our program today. Let's get started with our conversation with Amy Swear from the Heritage Foundation. Take a look and a listen. Amy, thanks so much for taking some time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. We are obviously living in a very crazy time at the moment. We are dealing with things that, frankly, I think are going to end up in court sooner or later, given some of the emergency declarations that we've seen, some of the confusion. I mean, you look at what's going on in Ohio right now, where today is primary day, and the state has in essence canceled the primary. A judge late Monday night said no, you can't do that, but they're going ahead and they're canceling here. I mean, this is a scary time for all Americans, but I think folks are right to be concerned about what may happen to our rights and to our constitutional freedoms at this point in time.
No, absolutely. And I think you're starting to see this, not just with, certain particular events like with the primaries in Ohio, but also coming to the forefront are, things that we've kind of known are there in the background with emergency power declarations via, mayors or governors, but that I think a lot of people didn't quite realize just how expensive some of those purported emergency powers were. Until all of a sudden, like in New Orleans and in Champaign, Indiana, you had mayors signing these sort of grab bag emergency powers declarations saying, yeah, we can do X, Y, and Z. And it's sort of like this 3-page long document saying what they can and can't do in an emergency.
Yeah, absolutely. So Champaign, Illinois that was, the one that I saw out of Champaign was not just dealing with bans on transfers of firearms, but basically, the mayor, declared that she has the authority to ration the sale of food, water, gasoline. I mean, it's really amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so. The thing to keep in mind right now is that so I've seen a number of these declarations, but it looks like again these are sort of pre-written declarations. We like to call them grab bag powers, but it's where this is what the mayor is purporting he or she can do, but there doesn't seem to be any indication, at least from what I've seen, that any of these mayors actually plan right now on using any of these powers in any specific way. They're just sort of sitting there going, yeah, now I have these powers because we've declared an emergency. So I think that's important, that the citizens of Champaign and New Orleans haven't yet, seen any specific declaration saying, okay, you can't sell ammo, you can't sell food in a specific way. But it is still concerning that you sort of have in the background these purported abilities to severely limit the rights of those citizens in what, I think most of us would consider this a very concerning time in America with all of the, the spread of what could be a very dangerous disease. But we're not quite at, I think, what a lot of people would consider, a true emergency necessitating the use of those powers in that way.
Yeah, and and it's interesting because we've seen at the federal level, President Trump during his press conference Monday afternoon, there were a lot of reporters asking, are you going to declare a national curfew? Are you going to do all of these things that, again, would be extraordinarily problematic under the Constitution? This is one of the reasons why we're seeing a lot of this at the state level, because of federalism, because of the 9th and 10th Amendments, and the fact is that the federal government does not have extraordinary powers to do some of these sorts of things. We have always sort of delegated those steps to state and local governments, but frankly, we are living in something that this country has never really gone through before, at least not for 100 years or more. And so, you look at a lot of these emergency declarations and people wonder, okay, well, how is it that these are even on the books? Well, they've never had an opportunity to be challenged before. Right, because they've never been in effect. So you can't just bring a lawsuit because somebody wrote a law. Oftentimes courts will say, well, you don't have standing, right, because you're not actually impacted by this law that may be on the books, but it's not being enforced, or no state of emergency has been declared. Do you think that going forward over the next couple of weeks, we're likely to see challenges if any of these types of provisions were to be enforced?
Well, I think certainly if one of these mayors or governors were to come out with a plan saying, specifically under X, Y, and Z circumstances, or even just, broadly across the board, you can't buy, sell ammo, guns, or even start rationing food under certain circumstances, I think you will absolutely see those lawsuits go into effect. We do have some indication from certain federal circuits about how they would rule on these. So, for example, in 2012, a federal circuit court struck down a North Carolina statute that was actually in effect. It's a little bit different than sort of these unknowns of what a specific mayor might do with these powers. Mm-hmm. But the North Carolina statute essentially said if there is a state of emergency or a zone of emergency established in the state, you essentially do not have a right to keep and bear arms outside the home. So you can't bring guns outside the home in a place where a state of emergency has been declared. The federal circuit court struck that down and said, this is overly broad. It's way too broad. It's affecting people. You essentially have to be able to say these specific individuals are dangerous under these circumstances if they're exercising the right outside the home, and said it's too broad. But again, that was a statute that was right then in effect, that had effect on the citizens of North Carolina. And again, because we're not seeing that right now, we just have mayors saying, I have the power to do this,
right? But
you don't know what I'm doing or if I'm going to do it yet. It is a little bit different right now, but that at least gives us an indication that there are certain federal courts out there that have looked at similar statutes and said, yeah, this is way too broad.
Absolutely. And even though court systems around the country right now are starting to operate on an emergency basis, they are still operating. And I would think that a question like this, if it were to come up, would be of a great importance. I think that this would be something that, courts would handle. We're also seeing, right now, I wrote a story earlier today about Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh area, where basically the county has suggested, they haven't, required or mandated yet, but they've suggested that, quote unquote, non-essential businesses close. You got a lot of gun stores that are saying, listen, we're essential businesses, right? We're staying open, and we're going to, make sure that, folks who need firearms and ammunition during this time are going to be able to get it. If the county were to come out and, they haven't done this yet again, but if they were to come out and say, listen, you all are closing, again, I think that would be another area where you would see litigation filed and a case brought saying you are impacting the ability of average Americans to protect themselves during a state of emergency. And again, I got to ask you, as an attorney, obviously, I'm sure that, you're just as concerned about everything else that's going on in our day-to-day life. But this is, on one level, this is kind of fascinating because we're actually opening up a whole new chapter in constitutional law and litigation.
Well, right. And to me, those sorts of questions, for example, with is this an essential business in a time of emergency? It gets to sort of the core of the Second Amendment,
Mm-hmm.
right? That it comes down to this basic right to keep and bear arms precisely because we are the unorganized militia. We are sort of, the core of our own both personal defense and communal defense. People who have listened to any of my testimony about this in front of Congress or even just read some of the things I've written, I love to point back to, you look at the LA riots, you look at Ferguson, you look at times, in American history where the government either could not or would not be there to protect its citizens. The fundamental, protection that citizens have was their own ability to keep and bear arms when they were sort of in these more localized emergency situations, but emergency situations nonetheless. And even just on a more personal level, it's been sort of the last week, 2 weeks or so that I've had so many people, both, colleagues and just, people who've gotten to know me on Twitter come to me and say, look, I'm thinking very seriously for the first time about buying a gun because they sort of see those first stages of societal panic. They see places, like entire police departments and I think it's in Colorado, a couple other states that have essentially said, look, if this isn't an emergency call that we determine is an emergency, we're probably not going to send cops to it because they're trying to keep law enforcement officials safe from the pandemic.
Yeah.
And those sorts of things that they're seeing sort of Black Friday type panic in stores. People hoarding toilet paper. They're seeing that and they're saying, I need to be able to defend myself. And so I think you're right that all of this cuts down to the core of that right to keep and bear arms. And so it's sort of this core issue being played out in a way that I think a lot of people look at that question and they're like, it's a regulatory question. This sort of obscure law of is this an essential business, but it's actually getting at core issue.
Oh, absolutely it is. Listen, Amy, I really appreciate you spending some time with us today. We'll probably be reaching out at some point because, again, with everything that we're seeing each and every day, there are new headlines that just make you, blink your eyes and say, wow. And so I imagine that at some point we're going to have some more questions for you. Hopefully we can give you a call and have you back soon.
Absolutely. Would love it.
All right. Amy Swear at Heritage Foundation, heritage.org, Daily Signal. And Amy, thanks for everything you do. Now, as I mentioned, I also had the opportunity to talk with Larry Keane of the National Shooting Sports Foundation about the incredible surge in ammunition and firearm sales. Folks at ammo.com have been keeping track just of their sales over the past month or so. They released some data earlier today showing that over the past couple of weeks, they've seen an increase of about 300% in terms of their ammunition sales. And they've got a chart showing, what states are buying the most ammo. Texas, as you might imagine, number one, just because of the huge population center and the huge base of gun owners. California would probably be up there at number 2 or number 3, but you can't make online ammo sales in California anymore. In fact, if you're a California gun owner and you're trying to stock up on ammunition right now, you're in a world of hurt. This is something that we're going to be talking about hopefully tomorrow with Chuck Michelle from the California Rifle and Pistol Association. They've got litigation going on right now challenging that state's online ammo ban as well as the ammunition background check law because of so many false denials. Listen, you have a better chance in California as a gun owner of going to the gun store, trying to pick up a couple of boxes of 9mm and being told, no, you can't, even though you're a legal gun owner, than you do with actually catching COVID-19. Because there have been tens of thousands of these false denials, legal gun owners stuck in limbo, unable to complete their purchase of ammunition, going back months and months. Meanwhile, the state of California says, we're working on it. Yeah, well, there is some problems, but we're working on it. They're not working on it. Or if they are, it's not getting any better. So I'm curious to see, again, we've got this court challenge taking place. Now would be a really good time for a judge to issue an injunction against this law so that Californians actually can buy ammunition without having to go through all of the regulatory red tape that is preventing legal gun owners from legally acquiring ammunition during a time of emergency. Now, we didn't talk about California specifically with Larry Keane, but we did talk about a number of other locations as well as what the industry is looking at generally. Take a look and a listen. Larry, thanks for taking a couple minutes today. I know that things are incredibly busy in everybody's world at the moment.
Yeah, it's it's the old proverb, "May you live in interesting times." Well, we certainly appear to be interesting times.
We are here, absolutely, and we are seeing around the country just an absolute surge in firearm and ammunition sales. I heard from the folks at ammo.com, online retailer, saying that over the past few weeks, they've seen their sales spike by more than 300%. A lot of the stores around the country are reporting runs on, common self-defense calibers like 9mm, .223, 40 Smith & Wesson, 45 ACP. What can you tell us about the industry and their ability to keep these shelves supplied and to keep Americans able to exercise their right to keep and bear arms during this time of uncertainty?
Well, I mean, obviously, there's been a huge surge in first ammunition and now firearms, in response to concerns about the potential for public unrest or civil disobedience going on if things, get really dodgy. But so there's no question that it's occurring. We're hearing the same things. We're in touch with folks at NICS, and they're describing the surge as unprecedented, just enormous increases, in the last couple of days. So, which is not really surprising. Maybe the extent of it. So one thing for folks to be aware of is you can likely expect delays to begin to build as the volume of transactions, grows over time. I mean, we're seeing, big increases. So that's one thing for folks to be aware of. Mm-hmm. In terms of capacity, I think there were a number of guns because it was a slow market in inventory. So I think for the near term, it probably would be able to handle the surge. But in talking with manufacturers, they're very concerned about making sure their workers remain safe.
Sure.
And keeping the coronavirus out of the factory so they can keep up and running. And I've not heard any issues with any manufacturer. So I think presumably production will continue and try to meet the demand. It's obviously difficult to ramp up production in that short of a period of time. Mm-hmm. And as always, you don't know how long this surge will last, but I think for the foreseeable future, it will continue. One of the things we're concerned about and monitoring is efforts by local governments to curtail the exercise of the Second Amendment and saying that you can't purchase firearms and ammunition, which we think would be blatantly unconstitutional. And this is exactly the kind of situation where your Second Amendment rights are most important, because you need to have the ability, you have the right, the God-given right to protect yourself and your family and your loved ones. And if the government says you can't acquire a firearm or ammunition for that purpose, seems to me to be both unconstitutional and unwise.
Absolutely.
Because people need to be able to protect themselves.
Absolutely. In fact, we've seen some gun stores in Allegheny County. The Pittsburgh Tribune did a story on this. So the county itself is asking right now, they're not demanding, but they're asking non-essential businesses to close. You got a number of gun stores who say, look, we are an essential business. We're not closing. It is essential that Americans be able to protect themselves in this time of uncertainty. And so they're remaining open. You've got, Champaign, Illinois. I think the mayor of New Orleans has signed an order. Mm-hmm. Albuquerque, New Mexico City Council looking at things. Right now, nobody's actually put a ban in place, but you do have some localities that are saying they have the authority to do this. But I'm guessing, going to be difficult to challenge any of these orders in court until they actually say, okay, we're not just hypothetically claiming we have this power. Now we're going to try to exercise this power.
From a legal point of view, that's correct. You wouldn't have standing until they actually do it. But I would agree with you, and I actually had a conversation with a member of Congress last evening on this very point about Pennsylvania. And it would seem to me that firearms stores, licensed retailers, are in fact an essential business, because it's an essential right that is most important when you have these sorts of crises where public safety may be at risk. And as we've seen in the past, after Katrina, for example, efforts to curtail the exercise of Second Amendment rights by law-abiding citizens, while it has, of course, no impact on criminals at all.
Right.
And it just curtails the ability of law-abiding citizens to protect themselves, their property, their neighbors, while police resources are stretched in responding to the crisis. So hopefully, post Heller and McDonald, we won't see many cities go down this path. But it remains to be seen. We did see this one town in Illinois. They have put out a statement saying they are not invoking that power, which is in the underlying State Emergency Powers Act, which predates Heller, predates the decision by the Supreme Court that it's a fundamental constitutional right that applies to the states. So I do think it's subject to a challenge, if it is invoked, and like in the case of Albuquerque, they had a hearing on it last evening. Of course, the public couldn't go because of concerns about the virus and social distancing, which I understand and can appreciate. So I don't know if it's passed or not. If it has passed, I wouldn't be at all surprised if there's a legal challenge.
And that's the thing. I mean, I think that people do understand we are in an extraordinary situation, a situation that certainly hasn't existed in this country for at least 100 years, going back to the Spanish flu pandemic. But even given these extraordinary times, that doesn't mean that we can be stripped of all of our rights. And I think it's important too that before we get to the point of challenging these in court, we as voters, we as citizens of the communities where we live, need to be reaching out to our city council members, our mayors, our state officials, and telling them, listen, this is, we understand the pressure that you're under, and we understand that you're trying to keep people safe, but that doesn't mean that you can simply strip citizens of their constitutional rights at this point in time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's one thing to say, limit the size of crowds so you don't, from a public health perspective, but to say that, you can't exercise your right to acquire a firearm for self-protection when you most need it is deeply troubling, and any ordinance or law along those lines would strike me as being blatantly unconstitutional. And I certainly hope that cities don't do that, because they've spoken many times. Law enforcement does not have anything to fear from a law-abiding citizen owning a firearm for self-protection. In fact, it helps law enforcement. Absolutely.
We do have some good news to report out of Albuquerque. The city council did pass an emergency powers ordinance, but they amended it last night. City Councilman Pat Davis, this is from KOB, said the original civil emergency powers ordinance that was passed in the 1960s to address potential widespread rioting includes many provisions that would be unenforceable today, such as closing down gun stores and gas stations. Under the new version of the bill, Mayor Keller will have the authority to close streets, limit the quantities of certain items sold at stores, and close places where big gatherings happen, such as places of worship. But they specifically note, the mayor's office specifically noted, the legislation being considered tonight does not ban gun sales, confiscate guns, prohibit liquor sales, nor does it implement a curfew or close streets, and the mayor's declaration will not either. So that is one bit of good news, I guess, coming from Albuquerque.
Yeah, I had heard that. So that is good news, for sure. And it shows you the importance of being engaged politically. I mean, NSSF sent a letter. We know retailers in the city sent a letter expressing concerns about limiting Second Amendment rights, and I'm sure many citizens in Albuquerque and thereabouts communicated as well. So it shows the impact that being engaged politically and expressing your, asserting your First Amendment rights to protect your Second Amendment rights.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Larry, I appreciate you spending a couple of minutes with us, sir. I do know that things are busy for you right now, but I hope we can stay in touch, and thank you for the information today.
It's great to spend time with you always, Cam. Have a good day.
You too, sir. Larry Keane with the National Shooting Sports Foundation joining us here on Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. All right, so that is all the time we've got for you today. We will be back tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to try to get another armed citizen story for you. We'll be back to the recidivist report, as well as our good deed of the day. You can have your good deed of the day by washing your hands, 30 seconds, sing the song, do whatever you got to do. Maintain, a nice, safe distance between folks. Stay at home as much as you can. We are on a limited lockdown at my place. I have not left my home to have contact with anybody else for several days, just because my wife is immunocompromised with her lung cancer, the chemotherapy that she's on. We're making sure that we're playing it extra precautious, but we will be here tomorrow. I hope that you are playing it extra cautious as well, and we will be back tomorrow with another, I'm supposed to fire off that music at some point too, so I can talk as the music swells majestically underneath me, but I forgot to do that. So let's do that now. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. There it is. In the meantime, don't forget you can subscribe to Town Hall Media at YouTube. Never miss a program. Also, you can subscribe to Bearing Arms, Cam and Company at Apple Podcasts. And if you want to support the Second Amendment journalism that we're doing at BearingArms.com, you can become a VIP member at BearingArms.com. Get exclusive analysis, commentary, and more. Thank you so much for being a part of the program, for being a part of the Cam and Company community, and we'll see you tomorrow with another show. Be safe.